Kara Swisher decided to leave the Washington Post to cover the internet full-time. That decision has made her one of the most respected and feared journalists on the beat, holding those in the tech world accountable.
Feel like you're violating people's privacy?
One of the most outspoken critics of the tech industry and the billionaire moguls who are cozying up to the White House right now.
I don't know a better Musk translator.
As he got richer and richer, got crazier and crazier.
Very successful podcast, Recode Decode.
Author of Burn book, Kara Swisher.
I'm Kara Swisher, and welcome to the Burnouts.
When you first started out your career, you were a student at Georgetown and you were correcting the paper, right? You were finding spell check errors.
What was happening was I was writing columns as a freshman. When I got there, I didn't want to stay at Georgetown because it was very anti-gay, it was anti-women, and it was just a bad campus fit for me. I was going to transfer. So someone came in and said, why don't you write for the student newspaper? You seem very funny. And so I started to write a column, and it did really well right away. And so one of the things that drove me crazy was how sloppy they were in terms of how they edited and things like that. And so I just was always like, this isn't right. And the job you're talking about was at the Washington Post. So that was later. I didn't like working for the student newspaper and started to do internships around Washington, which is super easy to do. And I suggest everybody does them, in college. Just work in the workplace. And
Favorite internship?
Probably the first one I did for a magazine editor. And just whatever you do that's kind of scut work, kind of thing. And I recommend it to my kids and everything else where you just get to do everything. A friend of mine son is a page at the Senate. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, getting water for senators. I'm like, good.
My dad was a page in Olympia.
Was he?
Yeah, he was for years. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
He talks about it way too much.
Actually, it's a great job because you get to see how things work. And so I called the Washington Post because I wrote a story in the student newspaper that one of their reporters covered, and the reporter story was full of errors, and it drove me crazy. And so I called them. It was just a shitty little story. They send the worst people to cover things at Georgetown. And so I got in touch with the editor there, and he had me in and said, come down on the bus. And so I took the bus down from the gates of Georgetown, and I went up and told him he sucked, and he hired me. He hired me as not an intern. I was paid. I was a copy aide.
How much did they pay you?
Oh, God, nothing. My first real job was $14,000 a year, so not much. Just an hourly wage, probably. I would bet it was somewhere under $10 an hour. But I delivered mail. I worked at night. They called it night news aide. I did everything. And while I was there, I started to see the opportunities of writing. And I got whatever writing I could get, even the lowest level writing, so that editors would get to know me and I'd say yes. And what happens is a lot of people at work who work there get themselves lazy, like this reporter did. And so I just volunteered for everything, like whatever it was, covering things on the mall during the summer for the Smithsonian Folk Festival. I'll go. It was really hot. And so I did every job that I could and met everybody that I could, and then eventually worked my way up there. I went to Columbia Journalism School in the interim, had another job, but I just did whatever it took, essentially, and didn't think anything was too good for me. I think a lot of people feel that.
I love this sense of, not feeling like anything's too good for you and then just consistently raising your hand. But I want to go back to the boldness of how you first got the job, which is by criticizing them. I think that that's something that's really interesting because with the job market being so tough right now, we also don't encourage a lot of young women to be super bold about what they want. But where is the line when you're going for a new job of telling them hey, here's things I can improve at your company versus being careful because you actually do want the role?
The person I met luckily saw it as a compliment. You could do better. Why did you? And he was right. He was like, you're right. This was really sloppy. And I was like, yeah. And they're a newspaper. And so it was out of great regard for the Washington Post. It was not that I thought they sucked. I thought they didn't suck. And then they did. And I was angry about their suckage. And so, and he said, you think you could do it better? And I said 100 times, it's 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. I was like, are you kidding me? Of course I could. And then he said, well, why don't you show me? And so that was that. Other times it didn't work. I was up for a job where it was one of these airline magazine type of jobs, right? Writing for that. And I was very confident because I was a good writer. And the guy, it's always a guy, sometimes it's a woman, said, you're very confident. And I'm like, yes. What do you want me to say? Oh, no, thank you, sir. And so I just didn't. I go, yeah, I am because I'm really good. And he was like, you shouldn't say that. And I said, it's factual, so I don't know what to tell you. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people find it amusing, some people find it repugnant. I didn't get what I didn't get. And so at one point, one when I didn't get an internship at the Post, I got it later. I got one later after I went to Columbia. So I had the Columbia degree, which of course was ridiculous because I was the same person. And he said, when I didn't get it, I said, "Are you kidding me? I'm better than all these people." And he was like, you know, you got to wait your turn. I'm like, I'm not waiting my turn. I'm like, why should I wait my fucking turn? I don't even understand what that means. And so, and I said, you know, someday I'm going to be a really famous reporter and you're going to be retired in an old folks home. I'll come visit you and say, see, you know, and he would laugh. You know, I'd be funny about it. I wouldn't be strident or, I hate that word about women, actually. I wouldn't be like mean about it. I'd be funny. I'm like, someday I'm going to be really famous and you're going to, you know, be like being fed applesauce and I'm going to maybe come visit you or maybe give you the time of day because that's the kind of gal I am. And so they think it was funny and it was a truth to it, right? I did it with John McLaughlin, who I worked for, who I turned in for sexual harassment. You know, I did it with everybody. I was like, someday.
Did you always think I'm going to be famous and a very successful journalist?
Not journalist, but I thought I was going to be something special. I did. My dad died when I was younger, so I didn't have him around. I had my mom, who wasn't particularly helpful about my career or anything else, really. So I kind of, my brothers and I are all really successful. And a lot of people think that when you have a parent who dies at a young age, you get very functional. And I think about my own many children. We remove obstacles from their way a lot of the time. And therefore, they're surprised when they hit them, right? And I had a lot of obstacles.
I want to talk about money. So when you went to Georgetown, who was paying for your tuition?
When my dad died, there was an insurance policy. And so, and my grandparents had left me some money. And so I managed my money since I was very young, 18 years old. And so, yeah, what was left to me was in an account. And I paid for college and handled all my finances from them. And I worked a lot. My grandparents left me a good sum of money, definitely enough for college and to buy a house. And so I managed it, I invested it, I made sure I had enough, but I always had a job. I always felt like I'd like to have my own money. I bought my own moped when I was a kid. I did babysitting, I did this, and I bought it myself. And so I like to always have control of money. I never felt comfortable with other people giving me money. And that's always been the case.
Are there any financial mistakes you've made or pieces of advice you have for young people who are managing their own money for the first time?
Well, I didn't take that job at Google when it was founded. I've been offered a lot of internet jobs very early in the founding. And I was like, why do I remember saying to the Bezos people, when Amazon was founded, they wanted me to work there early. And I said, why would I want to work for you? I was like, because I'd be getting married in Venice right now, I guess. I'm a pretty good investor. I've been a good real estate investor. But money doesn't motivate me compared to other things that motivate me. Mostly what motivates me is I like the job I'm doing, that I enjoy it. I wish money motivated me more, but it just doesn't. It just doesn't.
Do you have any advice for people of like, this is how you did it when you were younger?
I had jobs. I had jobs, whether it was when I was younger and I babysat or I did photography in high school. I was a good photographer. I had a dark room. And I took people's senior class pictures, charged quite a bit for them. You know what I mean? And
Love
so
that.
I made a couple $1,000s doing that, and like $5,000 or $6,000, and that's enough for a summer. You know what I mean? I had summer jobs. I'm trying to think. I sold chipwiches. I sold ice cream. I did a lot of freelance writing, and then I worked at the Post. I always worked somewhere where I had my own job, and I paid for all my stuff. Yeah. So
Yeah, because what I'm curious about is if you look at your business evolution, I think a lot of it now is oriented in owning your own IP, and you've structured some very interesting deals.
I did.
So when did you start to learn to be more savvy?
Pretty early. One of the things that, especially with women, they try to make you feel as if you shouldn't ask for more, and certainly men do it all the time. And so, you know, I'd be in different negotiations. They're like, hey, just take a little less and then we'll have a drink. We'll be friends. I'm like, I don't need any more friends. I have friends. You're not one of them. And I would always be like, give me the fucking money. Like, give me more. I would always ask for more. What's really helpful is if you can link what's being the revenue to you. And so I always did that. So it was rather explicit. And so it wasn't like, oh, we'll pay you this. I'm like, no, I made this and I'll take this portion of it. And so I was always very aware of what the revenue was. And I think a lot of reporters certainly aren't. But I think I probably learned that from tech people. They got what I really liked about the tech business is, say in media, they gave you a salary. You don't know why you got that, you know, like, and you don't know what anyone else is making. And they try to keep that from you so that you don't have any. I think transparency is like, okay, I'm earning this versus my contribution here. And when you're in a tech scene, you do know your contribution, right? You're the founder or top engineer or whatever. And so I was always aware of what my contribution was and then asked for that, like whatever it was, especially when I started to be more entrepreneurial. And like at one point, when we started All Things D for Dow, I was an employee of Dow Jones. We made a couple $1 million in the first year in profit. And I was like, we just made that. And we didn't get anything. Like the company kept the whole thing. And that wouldn't have existed without us. It was our idea that then became the thing. And they, for some reason, thought it was theirs. And I was like, this wouldn't, And they're like, well, you're being paid as an employee. And I was like, well, what employee turns in millions of dollars in profit? Nobody at the time. And still, all media companies were struggling. So this was a significant addition to their profits. And I think at one point we were 8% of net income. We're like,
Jesus.
Mr. and Mrs. 8%. Media companies don't make a lot of money. And so it was really irritating. And so the second year, and I called Walt, who was doing it with me, and I said, did you get the flowers? Because I didn't get the fucking flowers. Like, we gave them millions of dollars. So the next year, we got a fee. It still was small. And the next year, we said, we want a third, or we're going to do it somewhere else. We're just going to go. Like, I don't believe it went for 3 years. The second year, we should have said, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. And so they struck it because they didn't think we would make as much money as we did. And later, they're like, oh, we should have given you a raise. We're like, no. But then it was fair. Like, we made it. And without I find something really satisfying for me is that, like, whether it was All Things D or whatever I make, people then work for me, so I create jobs for people. And that's a really great feeling from an idea. Walt and I were always proud that we employed, 40 people for 20 years. Like, that's all those families. That's all those things. And they also worked really hard to make the product great, too. And so we really like that idea, that you come up with an idea and then create economic opportunity for lots of people. I spent a lot of time advising people, both old and young, of how to be entrepreneurial. So it's a nice feeling because then you're in control of your destiny as opposed to other people just randomly. And they make things up. So it's like, they do. Like, why is this person earning this? It is always, once you actually pull the transparency away, you notice white guys make more. They do. You can look at the numbers. Like, it's really, and it's like, why? Precisely why? Like, are they better? Because you can entertain that. Maybe they're better. Mm-hmm. Probably not. Right? They aren't. But that's because women, whenever I manage people, which it's not my favorite thing to do, but I did always notice that men would ask for more undeservedly and women would ask for less, which they deserved. Like, it was always the case. And I'd often be like, ask for more. You can ask for more. And the men were like, one guy I was trying to fire, actually. And I said, he's like, I think I deserve a raise. I said, I think I should fire you. See, interesting difference in our opinion about you. And he's like, well, I think, I did this and this and this. And I said, I think you fucked up this, this, and this. I said, so what I'm doing right here, and it's the first time I was very honest with someone. I'm like, what I'm doing right here is preparing to fire you. And you're not getting a raise. That's definitely not happening. And it was so interesting. But his mentality was to ask for more.
I also think it's about learning to ask for the right things. When I look at the negotiations of our female employees versus our male employees are so much better at understanding they should ask for more equity because they understand that that's where the real upside is.
If it is, yeah.
If it is, yeah, versus only negotiating for pennies and dollars. Or if they are asking for a raise, it's like 20, 30, 40,000, not can I have $5,000 more?
No, it's true. I don't know what that is. And I hate to say that's the case, but it is. It really, truly is. You just have to understand what your leverage is and what your contribution is. And that's why I like to make them explicit, because then it's just right there. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm making this much money, this is how much I want of it. And it wouldn't exist without you. And one of the things that's, I think, very hard, especially for women, is willingness to walk away. Like, I think I'll leave then, because I can make money elsewhere. And I think one of the attributes I have is I'm always willing to leave. And it's not a threat. I don't do it as a, like, I'm going to leave now if you don't give me what I want. I never do that. I'm just like, okay, then I'll leave. Like, because I believe in myself and my own entrepreneurial. I believe in my record, and I believe I can do it myself. You have to be willing to walk away. And that's and really mean it and believe in yourself.
What I'm really curious about is how did you make the decision to leave the Wall Street Journal? And then what happened when Rupert Murdoch said that he would...
was mad,
he
was so
wouldn't
mad.
let you take that IP with you.
I knew he wouldn't let me take the IP because IP is everything in media, but I offered to buy it, right? And I thought that I made a fair offer, and he wanted an enormous amount of money, 10 million. And then I jokingly said to them, I'm like, I could buy fuckrupert.com and start it there. And I think I will. I didn't ever buy it, but I could. At the time, I did check. You could buy it. I think it was 10 or 12. They were having a special on fuckrupert.com.
They have a
But
Black
I was
Friday
like,
special.
it was like, what's valuable to you? Now, I would have liked to have that because then I would have had the feed. It's an easier. But I'm again willing to start from zero. I've started from zero before. I've built it up before. It's easier to start from one number. Same thing happened in the New York Times. They kept my feed and gave it to someone else, and they're like, a successful show. I'm like, built on someone else's feed. And I made a stink about it because I was like, how can you do that? Like, how can you pretend you were successful when you weren't on your own? And so I kind of like starting from zero because then you know if it was you or not. And one of the things when I was at the Post, there was a particularly bad guy who would steal all my ideas. This is something happens to everybody in their career.
How old were you? When was this?
In my 20s.
Okay.
And I was full of ideas, right? I'm always like full of ideas. And he would always steal my ideas, and it was so I stopped telling him things, right? Like initially, you're like, assume people don't do that, and he did it. And I said, you know what? You can have it. I have a million ideas, and you don't have any.
Wow.
Fine, it's easy for me. Like I can, and it was a good feeling because I took back control rather than be victimized by that. I was like, got it, clocked it, understand people do that. It was a good lesson, and then I was like, I can think of them all day long, and you can't, and so. And he's in the same fucking place. So
Really?
yeah, he stayed in the same fucking place. Of course he did. He didn't have any good ideas.
Interesting. And what about your new deal? You decided it was a 70%, 30% profit split. Why'd you decide to do that?
Because I should, honestly, it should be 100%. No, it shouldn't be. Anyone that you do a deal with, and Vox happens to be a great partner, by the way. We love working with them. It's a great working environment. They're great people. They do their work really well. You have to sort of evaluate who you like to work with. Then the second part is what, like anybody, and this is not Vox or anybody else, is like, okay, I'm paying a lawyer what? And for what am I getting? What's the service I'm getting for whatever I'm doing? And then you try to figure out, could I get it somewhere else? Could I do it myself? Could I hire someone? So one of the things that Scott and I did was a market check. Like we went around and talked to people. And what are the ins and outs? And there were things Vox wanted that we were willing to give them that was good, better for them. We were like, okay, if you do this, we think in the market, you have to be knowledgeable about what the market is. It's worth this in the market. Why are you getting more? Like I do, but I do that with my agents. Like I didn't use an agent from our podcast deal because I was like, what am I paying you millions of dollars for? Like they're like, because we're your agents. I'm like, no, And we offered them a certain amount of money, and of course they like to work on a percentage basis. If you understand the underlying value and you understand the market, you know how much you should pay for something, right? And people frequently overpay. Mm-hmm. They don't as much underpay, but they definitely overpay. So I'm like, this is the value of it in the market, and this is what I'm willing to pay you. And if you know what the market is paying, you can know what you should pay people. And then you're like, look, this is what everyone else is being paid. I'm not going to pay you more. And so that was why we did that.
I want to change and go into like your relationship with tech too, because I feel like you were the first journalist to be like, okay, let's pay attention to this. Let's start doing this conference.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about man-childs basically with money and power. And I think we see that so much in the administration today. And I'm curious, out of all the people you've interviewed, like who has changed the most once they got access to power or money?
There's a couple people. I mean, it depends. Some people started off irritating, like Bill Gates, and grew up and became more mature and became more interesting and had a wider perspective. That was great to see that happen. At one point I was with, we were interviewing Melinda, and I was standing backstage with Bill, and she was so smart. I'm like, I like you 10% more, and it was really funny. And it was, and then I happened to be married to someone he liked. He said, well, I like you 10% more, because he was always trying to top people. But it's people that progress, I appreciate, and certainly he has. Mark Cuban's another person. Steve Ballmer also. What a jerk. But then he's kind of charming now. And of course, the bar is, he's like, you like me now. I'm like, the bar is low. Unfortunately, a lot of people go the opposite direction, or they don't grow at all, really. They never progress. And, I put Mark Zuckerberg in that category. I would put Elon Musk, clearly, but he's got personal problems. He's got alleged drug problems, but it's very clear what's going on there. And they go backwards as they get wealthier. There are deleterious effects of wealth, which is that people kiss up to you, they agree with you, you're always right, and unless you have a very strong constitution, you can't resist that. And so a lot of them they live in these ever smaller worlds of enablers, and sometimes it ends badly, like with Tony Hsieh, who was at Zappos, lovely guy, but became more and more addicted to drugs, drinking. People around him became less and less good. I mean, it's a classic story. It's not a
bunch of yes men.
Yeah, it's a bunch of yes people, really. And so, it ends tragically for them. And in his case, he died because of lots of reasons, but he had mental problems. Nobody got him the help he needed. And he really basically killed himself, if you think about it, the way he behaved. And so, a lot of people end up like that. Most of them do, actually. They become they live in these little bubbles, and everyone tells them everything is great, and that's that, and that's where they live. And so those people I don't talk to anymore. I do talk to Gates, I talk to Cuban, I talk to, you know what I mean? And they're willing to accept feedback, which is, I think, I don't do it for my pleasure or my entertainment. It's like, I don't agree with you on that. And the same thing in media people, there are those who can take criticism, and there are those who just can't. And I think as you become wealthier, money is sort of the way it happens, but more powerful, you tend to get that way, which is kind of ironic that they were so obsequious to Trump. Here are the most powerful people on earth being obsequious to Trump. What? Really? What's the money for if not to say fuck you? Like, what's the point of having fuck you money if you can't say fuck you? And, look at Elon. I'm apologetic of the things I tweeted. Like, has he ever apologized to Paul Pelosi for tweeting heinous things about gays? Has he ever apologized to all these people he called names? No, he apologizes because it's in his financial self-interest to do so with Trump. And he's worried about the existential crisis to his businesses. And so that's even worse. You're like, really? You can't just stay with the fuck you. Like, just stick with it, even though, by the way, he did go over the line. He did. But probably he's not inaccurate about a lot of things he was saying.
And you used to be close with Elon. When did that relationship kind of shift?
It was interesting because he became crazier. I don't know what to say. He just got crazier and crazier. And as he got richer and richer, he had a lot of enablers around him. And he shed all the people that disagreed with him, like a Sam Altman or Reid Hoffman. He had good relationships with people who would push back on him. And then he didn't want the pushback. And that was that. It wasn't just me. It was a lot of people. And he got mad about something I tweeted. Like, someone in the Post had written a piece saying, I had been talking to him about his acquisition of Twitter for a while, and I was explaining some of the business things. We were doing live Twitters. We were getting advertisers for them, and I was telling him, look, if you did this right, you could do rather well. This is how much we're making. I was explaining because he wasn't really familiar with media, and so I said, look, we could make a couple $1 million on Twitter if we did it right. Like, if you made it into a YouTube, that was, if you sort of made it an event space and everything else. I was like, I don't know if it'll work, but we did. Cost us nothing, and we got $100,000 from this advertisement. So we were talking back and forth, and he seemed fine. And then sometimes he would have these little fits every now and again previously, but they all did. So it wasn't a new, fresh thing for me to experience. But there was a Washington Post story about Crimea where he was geofencing stuff at Starlink, and I had advocated that people pay him because he was providing a service. Like, we pay Lockheed, and he was like, we shouldn't do it for free. I'm like, he's 100% right. Why don't we just pay him and then you can utilize the stuff? Why is he deciding? It's like, if you buy a product, you should be able to, the Army should decide, the Navy, whatever, our military should decide, not him. Like, that's terrible for some random guy to decide, like, either going to sell, or he can decide whether to sell it or not to the military. That's his choice. So, but he can't decide where to deploy it. I was like, this is really fucked up. And so, largely because I worried about the impact of the Russians on him. I was worried. Lots of people are Chinese, they're Russians. It felt like there was some weird situations going on there. And so there was a piece in the Post, and someone said, we should pay him or something like that. And I said, we should absolutely pay him. And then there was a quote that said, Elon's going to Elon, which is like, it's not a negative or positive. It's true. That's right. He is. He's a very personality-driven person. And I said, Elon's going to Elon. That's the truth. And I think that's all I wrote. It's the truth.
Yeah,
it's like, so I wasn't, and his brother actually responded and said, no good deed goes unpunished. I go, absolutely. Like giving Starlink was a really good deed, but he got all messed up because of doing this. And his brother was very pleasant. Like, it was weird. And then he emailed me, which I never look at my emails. So it was like, oh, so I didn't look for weeks. And he wrote, "You're an asshole." That was it.
Did you ever respond?
I was like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, I wasn't insulting you here. I think he was who knows? It was 3 a.m. It was the same thing. He gets into a spin at whatever. He must have read it the way one of his enablers probably was trying to get an advantage. He didn't want people to. I don't know. I don't care. Like, an alleged drug addict's problems are not my problem. Like, if they're gonna. So, and then he started doing things that were really heinous, and I was critical. Like the thing about Paul Pelosi when he got beaten, he said it was a gay love triangle. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, the damage you can do to people.
Disgusting.
It was disgusting. And then he kept going. Whether it was people with mental diseases or. Et cetera. It just kept going. And then he was sort of affiliating with white supremacists. And you're like, and then all this nonsense about free speech. And then he'd shut people down. And you'd be like, oh, you're just a fucking liar. Like, and then, so I was very critical. And then I became very critical, which he didn't like. I thought, why not? What the hell?
But that's a point of journalism and a free media, is it needs to be critical.
Right.
And I feel like they've tried to, there's been a lot of efforts to take away the credibility of media too, which fascinates me.
I think he's got a passel of problems that have nothing to do with anyone but himself. So, and he's sort of the classic tale of, Icarus or Howard Hughes or whatever. It's not going to end well.
And do you think that this is unique to tech in any way? Because, you focus really on these tech entrepreneurs and stuff. But I think about men who have money in other spaces like finance, like Warren Buffett is an incredible example of like someone who's wealthy, who's actually a good guy.
Well, he's a unicorn.
He's a unicorn. That's fair. Yeah, he is a complete unicorn. Do you think that tech kind of self-selects for some of these personalities?
No, I just think they're the current rich people. Like, you know what I mean? The current winners, right? I mean, I'm sure this was the same with the train barons or the blank baron, whatever it happens to be. I think wealth is largely deleterious, especially for another generation, right? And so undeserved success is something people should know why they were successful. It doesn't mean, look, Rupert Murdoch's father was very wealthy, and he took that small business in Australia and made it into a global business. Like, that was him, right? I grew up, I would say, in a very good situation, but I took what I had and made it into something bigger. And so that doesn't mean that you have to be like poor and scrappy to make it. It doesn't at all. Like, there's lots of businesses like that where it's very Zuckerberg, great business person, terrible morals, but great business person. And so he took something and made it into something, right? And made the right decisions. I think what happens is, you ever watch Succession? I did the podcast for them. And one of the things that was really interesting to me, and I talked to the writer about this, Jesse Armstrong, is their worlds got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And more, I'd call them cashmere prisons. Like, they went from the plane to the to a car, to a boat, you know what I mean? And they live in these bubbles that are difficult to get out of. And I think it's hard for many, many people when everyone's agreeing with you. You don't know why your friends are your friends. And even they don't know why they're your friend. Like, it's nice, like, right? And so it creates it's very hard to have really clear friendships in that regard. And so, or people that push back on you. I look a lot at people's kids. Like, I went out with very well-known tech moguls kids. I took them out for dinner this week, and the kid was wonderful. And I was like, good job. I wrote him. I'm like, you're such a jerk, but your kid's great. I'm gonna assume it's your wife. But I was joking. But, I look at the kids and how they turn out.
And I want to circle back to Mark Zuckerberg. I loved your iconic interview with him where you grilled him on privacy when he was 26. He couldn't stop sweating.
There were several bad ones for him and I.
Why do you think that even though you're a hard ass, why do you think people always want to do an interview with you, even if they might be embarrassed?
Because they're not hard. They're hard. Look, one of the people I interviewed a lot was Steve Jobs, and he always said, like, they're fair. Like, if he's a smart person, does he want to be blicked up and down all day? I doubt it. Like, he's smart enough, and like, right? He doesn't like that. Like, I think smart people like smart questions. And if you actually take apart the interviews, they aren't tough. I just ask the direct question. That's different. Not like, how come you suck so much? Those aren't the questions I ask. I'm like, you are responsible for privacy across the globe. Explain to me why this isn't a violation of privacy. Explain to me your theory. And I need them to explain themselves. Often Zuckerberg could not explain himself because he hadn't thought of it. The more famous interview, I think, that one was more famous. But when we were arguing about anti-Semitism, like, he didn't know what he was doing. And by the interview, you could see he hadn't thought about it, but he had such an effect, an impact. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you don't even take the time to understand the issue. Mm-hmm. And so what I was trying to get at that interview was he was ignorant and he had power. And that was a real problem for me. That is a real problem when you have power and you are lazy or ignorant or sloppy or stupid. And that to me I won't put up with that, especially when you have that much impact. And I kept saying, the more when he was saying Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie, he just didn't do the work. And you're sort of like, there will be more anti-Semitism if this continues, and you will be directly responsible. And for some reason, someone like he always tries to, he's a polluter and he pretends he's not polluting. It's like Trump, he's an arsonist, and then he tells us, look, I put out the fire. I'm like, you started the fire. Like, that's all. I just point out the obvious. And if they're going to the ones I like are the ones that take responsibility. I think with Mark in that interview, I was like, I know I studied propaganda and the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, and I know where this is going to end because we have some history. Mm-hmm. Like, I know where this goes.
Of course, Elon bought Twitter. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. If you were a journalist today, you were just starting out, what advice would you give?
I tell people to go independent if they're very talented and they have something to say. And you can really, if you can figure out if you're offering something people want. There's a real fracturing of media right now. But a lot of these smaller entities are doing an amazing job. And I don't think that can continue forever. But the idea of these giant media companies is kind of over. I mean, everybody makes media right now. Not everyone makes good media. And so it's going to shake itself out in some fashion. But, I encourage someone like Casey Newton to create Platformer. He was at Vox. And I was like, well, you could make 10 times the money if you work. And so he provides a service that people really like. And so he's making a lot of money. And so, I advise people, if they have a great idea, to do it. That's what I always advise. For the big companies, it's not good. It's not good. And the Post it's affection from delivering I delivered the mail there. I have an affection for that place. I started my career there. I think it's a great brand. I don't know how you couldn't figure some financial way to fix it. Making it smaller, making it more, like, I have some ideas and I would like to have a chance to do that. But he prefers to own it because he's a rich guy. It's like owning another Bugatti for him, right?
And it's a microphone also for his beliefs if they're not doing like the editorial page.
Except he's not very smart. So the beliefs are not very interesting.
I just want to end this on a note of, for other young people who want to pursue a career like yours, what do you think are the best decisions that you made, and how would you advise other people to do the same?
One of the things that's important is to really do your homework. I think I know a lot, like I spent a lot of time not understanding it before I say something. And so I think doing your homework, I was a reporter for a long time and I spent a lot of time getting it right? And so I think people should really, it's very easy in this information age, and I do it myself. I was staring at, I forget what I was looking at on Instagram. It was so good. It was cooking. I like cooking. And I was like, what? It was an hour later. I was like, why am I looking at chopping of vegetables so long? It's really whatever it happens to be. I happen to like watching cooking. I always did since I was a kid. But, whether it's makeup or dancing or whatever it happens, or cool, whatever. It's a very addictive way to waste your time. And I think one of the things that I've always noticed is people that really spend time doing the work tend to be successful. You can be successful not doing the work, but you can't stay successful. And so one of the things is just really understanding, educating yourself. And someone was like, how are you so successful? And I'm like, I work harder than you do. I do. I work harder. I don't know what else to say, whether, and that applies if you're a cook, if you're a ditch digger, you're just better at it. You just work harder at it. And so I don't think that goes away in a digital age. I think you really, and find something where you can excel. And I think people don't do that. They don't think enough about, like, what's your angle? It's like a product. What are you doing that is different than other people? And what are you offering that's different? There's 3 things I apply to every single product I make, right? And I think about it a lot, which is 1, it's useful to people. like lately, for some reason, people have been coming up to me and going, "Thank you so much. You've helped me so much." It's because Scott and I refuse to be cowed by any of this. We're like, no, we're not. This is what here. We're going to work our way through it and be reasonable people. So be useful to people, whatever it happens to be. Whether you teach them how to cook, whether you teach them whatever it is, be useful. Give them something that's useful or an insight that they didn't have, something that they can use in their lives, or it makes them feel better. Whatever it happens to be. Right now, Pivot's in we make people feel better mode. We're funny. We're also useful. We give good insight. Secondly, be entertaining, or I don't mean like a stupid way, but interesting, entertaining. Like try harder to like deliver your message in ways that are just more entertaining, more interesting, funny. Could be sad. It depends. Just something that holds people's attention, and then make something that nobody else can make, whether it's AI or another person can't copy it. A person or AI can't. Like you can't get this unless you get it from us. You can't copy it. You can't make it. You can't, like, without us, you can't do it. And so that's being unique, and it's really hard to do that. But if you're talented enough, if you have those three things, every product you make will be great. You're filling a need for people in some fashion in a way that, and the last thing lately, I would say, I make things that make people feel better. I know it sounds crazy because I'm known as like a tough person, but people do feel better after listening. They understand better. They feel smarter, or they feel better, or they've been moved in some way. And that to me is a gift to people. It's like that when you make a chocolate that's delicious. I really feel better after eating that, or I like that, or I don't know, whatever you happen to do that makes people feel better. I think in this day and age, people need to connect. And if you connect with people and connect them and give them something that's helpful to them, no digital product will win over you.
I love that. Well, thank you so much
Anyway,
for coming
thank you.
on.
You guys are great.